A single radar blip on a green cathode screen was never supposed to bring down a billion-dollar flying fortress, yet the world's most feared weapon was about to rain down in pieces over the streets of Hanoi. In December 1972, the United States unleashed the full weight of its strategic air power in a campaign designed to force North Vietnam to its knees and end the longest war in American history. For 12 days and nights, giant 8-engine B-52 Stratofortresses, the ultimate symbols of Cold War military might, rained destruction on Hanoi and Haiphong. Armed with state-of-the-art electronic jamming equipment and escorted by hundreds of fighter jets, these flying fortresses were deemed invulnerable to any air defense system on Earth. Yet, within hours of the first strikes, the night sky lit up with the fiery trails of Soviet-designed surface-to-air missiles, and the unthinkable happened. Giant bombers were ripped apart in mid-air, crashing into the suburbs of the Vietnamese capital. How did a nation with virtually no strategic bomber fleet of its own manage to challenge and ultimately disrupt the most sophisticated aerial onslaught ever assembled? This was not just a battle of technology. It was a desperate, high-stakes chess match played at 30,000 feet, where a single mistake meant instant death for crews on both sides. The clash would become known to history as Operation Linebacker II, or as the Vietnamese called it, the Dien Bien Phu in the air. To understand how this aerial duel changed the course of the Vietnam War, we must look beyond the propaganda of both sides and examine the raw, human reality of those 12 terrifying nights. We must explore how North Vietnamese missile crews, operating in cramped, sweltering radar cabins, learned to see through the impenetrable wall of American electronic jamming. We must understand the intense pressure on American pilots who were ordered to fly predictable, rigid flight paths directly into the teeth of the world's most dense air defense network. This is the story of 12 days that shook the world, where the limits of technological supremacy were tested against the ultimate boundaries of human endurance. It was a confrontation that proved that even the most advanced military technology could not guarantee victory when faced with an adaptable, determined opponent. Through this deep dive, we will uncover the strategies, the human stories, and the legacy of a campaign that marked the dramatic climax of the air war over Vietnam. The stakes could not have been higher, as the survival of an entire city hung in the balance, while the superpowers of the Cold War watched in breathless anticipation. This campaign would redefine the future of military aviation and leave an indelible mark on the collective memory of both nations. The clash of these two highly determined forces would echo through the decades, offering profound lessons on the nature of modern warfare and the limits of raw industrial power. As we examine the timeline of these fateful 12 days, we begin to see a picture of intense human courage, brilliant tactical improvisation, and the devastating cost of a conflict that pushed both sides to their absolute limits. By late 1972, the war in Vietnam had dragged on for nearly a decade, leaving both Washington and Hanoi exhausted but unwilling to yield. In Paris, peace negotiations between U.S. National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger and North Vietnamese diplomat Le Duc Tho had reached a tantalizing breakthrough in October, only to collapse in December over mutual distrust and the objections of South Vietnamese President Nguyen Van Thieu. President Richard Nixon, facing immense domestic political pressure to bring American troops home while securing an honorable peace, decided that only a massive, decisive blow could break the diplomatic deadlock. He resolved to use the ultimate weapon short of nuclear bombs, the B-52 Stratofortress. Until then, these massive bombers had been used primarily in the south, away from the lethal air defenses of Hanoi. Sending them into the heavily defended airspace of the north was a massive gamble. The U.S. Strategic Air Command believed that the B-52's advanced electronic countermeasures, which flooded enemy radar screens with artificial static, would make them invisible to North Vietnamese tracking systems. On the other side, the North Vietnamese military had spent years preparing for this exact scenario. Under the leadership of General Vo Nguyen Giap and the Air Defense Air Force Command, they had carefully analyzed the tactics of American air power. They knew that if the Americans wanted to force a surrender, they would eventually have to send the B-52s to Hanoi. The Vietnamese Air Defense Network was a highly integrated system of Soviet-supplied SA-2 Guideline surface-to-air missiles, MiG-21 and MiG-17 fighter interceptors, and thousands of anti-aircraft guns, all linked by a sophisticated early warning radar network. It was the most densely concentrated air defense system in the history of warfare. The Vietnamese had even compiled a manual, known as the Red Book, which detailed the weaknesses of the B-52 and how to track them through heavy electronic noise. This manual was the result of years of combat experience and meticulous observation of American flight patterns. The stage was set for a confrontation of unprecedented violence, where the technological pride of the United States would meet the calculated resilience of a nation fighting for its survival. Every radar operator, missile loader, and fighter pilot in North Vietnam knew that the ultimate test was fast approaching, and they prepared with a quiet, desperate intensity. They understood that the defense of their capital was not just a military necessity, but a fight for their very existence as a sovereign people. This deep preparation would prove crucial in the days to come, as the skies over Hanoi prepared to host the most intense air battle of the entire Cold War era, testing the limits of both technology and human will. On the afternoon of the 18th of December 1972, the silence of the Western Pacific was shattered as dozens of B-52s roared off the runways of Andersen Air Force Base in Guam and U Ta Pao in Thailand. Codenamed Operation Linebacker II, the mission was simple but brutal: maximum destruction of military and infrastructure targets in Hanoi and Haiphong. As the first wave of bombers approached the Vietnamese coast, their electronic jamming transmitters turned on, filling North Vietnamese radar screens with a blinding blizzard of snow and static. To the missile operators on the ground, it appeared as though their eyes had been put out, but the Vietnamese had spent months studying this electronic camouflage. They discovered that by manually tracking the edges of the jamming corridors and using specialized radar frequencies, they could occasionally spot the faint, pulsing signature of the giant bombers hidden within the noise. At 7:40 p.m., the first sirens wailed across Hanoi, sending hundreds of thousands of citizens scrambling into underground concrete shelters. Minutes later, the earth shook as the first sticks of 500-pound bombs obliterated their targets, including the Kham, No Repair Yards, and Dien Bien railway station. But in the missile command posts, crews remained calm. They waited until the bombers entered their optimal engagement zones before launching their SA-2 missiles. The night sky was illuminated by dozens of white-hot telephone poles rising into the clouds. Suddenly, a massive fireball erupted over the outskirts of Hanoi. A B-52, hit directly by an SA-2, disintegrated in mid-air. It was the first of many. Over the next 3 nights, the Strategic Air Command suffered shocking losses, losing 9 B-52s to missile fire. The American crews, flying in rigid, predictable bomber streams designed to maximize electronic jamming coverage, were being funneled directly into pre-sighted kill zones. The myth of B-52 invincibility was shattered in a matter of hours, forcing American commanders to realize that their technological superiority had met a highly organized, lethal defense that was far more capable than they had ever anticipated. The loss of these prized aircraft sent shockwaves through the American military establishment, sparking intense debates among commanders who realized their current tactics were leading to a potential disaster. The psychological impact on the B-52 crews was profound, as they were forced to fly into a wall of fire with tactics that seemed increasingly suicidal. Meanwhile, the defenders on the ground found renewed hope, realizing that these mechanical monsters could indeed be killed if they maintained their discipline, patience, and precision under fire. The climax of the campaign came on the night of the 26th of December 1972, after a brief 36-hour Christmas truce. Realizing that their previous tactics were disastrous, the Strategic Air Command completely redesigned their strike plans. Instead of waves of bombers flying in a single file, they launched a massive, coordinated assault involving 120 B-52s, striking Hanoi and Haiphong simultaneously from 7 different directions. It was the largest single bomber raid since the Second World War. The air over Hanoi became a chaotic, lethal vortex of fire and metal. American jamming was more intense than ever, but the Vietnamese missile crews, knowing this was the decisive battle, pushed their equipment to the absolute limit. They used optical tracking systems when their radars were completely blinded, aiming the missiles manually using visual sightings of the bombers against the night sky. On the ground, the destruction was catastrophic. A stick of bombs struck Kham Thien Street, a densely populated residential area in central Hanoi, killing nearly 300 civilians and destroying hundreds of homes in an instant. The tragedy galvanized the defenders, fueling their determination to resist. In the sky, Vietnamese MiG-21 pilots, including the legendary Vu Xuan Tu, flew daring missions to disrupt the bomber formations. In a desperate move to protect his homeland, Thu rammed his MiG directly into a B-52, sacrificing his life to destroy the giant bomber. Despite the overwhelming American numbers, the air defense crews managed to shoot down several more B-52s on that single night. The sky was filled with parachutes as captured American airmen were led away to the Hoa Lo prison, known to them as the Hanoi Hilton. The sheer intensity of the battle pushed both sides to the brink of collapse, but the defenders of Hanoi refused to yield, marking the night of December 26 as the turning point of the entire campaign. This night demonstrated that no amount of technological preparation could completely eliminate the human element of war, as both sides displayed extraordinary acts of courage and sacrifice in the dark skies of North Vietnam. The ruins of Kham Thien became a rallying cry for the entire nation, cementing the resolve to endure whatever the American bombers could throw at them. The battle had reached its absolute peak, and the outcome would decide the future of the entire war. By December 28, the relentless pace of the bombing had taken a heavy toll on both combatants. The North Vietnamese air defense forces were running dangerously low on SA-2 missiles, with some launch sites completely depleted and unable to reload in time. The logistics of transporting and preparing these massive missiles under constant aerial bombardment was a monumental task, requiring hundreds of volunteers to move equipment through cratered roads. On the American side, the morale of the flight crews was fracturing under the strain of unsustainable losses and the realization that their electronic countermeasures were not the perfect shield they had been promised. However, the tactical adjustments made by the U.S. military, combined with the sheer volume of ordnance dropped, had severely damaged North Vietnam's industrial and military infrastructure. Both sides realized that continuing the conflict at this intensity would lead to mutual exhaustion. On December 29, President Nixon ordered a halt to the bombing north of the 20th parallel, signaling an end to the active phase of Linebacker II. The diplomatic deadlock was broken. On the 2nd of January, 1973, negotiators returned to the peace table in Paris. The North Vietnamese delegation, having survived the maximum effort of American strategic air power, was now in a position to finalize the terms of the agreement without making major political concessions. On the 27th of January 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were officially signed, leading to the complete withdrawal of American combat forces from Vietnam and the release of hundreds of American prisoners of war. The 12 days of terror had ended, leaving behind a scarred landscape, but a clear path toward the end of direct U.S. military involvement in the region, paving the way for the ultimate reunification of the country. The signing of the Accords was a bittersweet moment, representing the end of a long and bloody chapter, yet leaving an unresolved conflict between North and South Vietnam that would eventually be decided on the battlefield 2 years later. The silence that fell over the skies of Hanoi was a profound relief, but the memory of the fire and destruction would remain etched in the minds of everyone who lived through those 12 days. The legacy of the 12 days and nights over Hanoi remains one of the most debated chapters of the Vietnam War, viewed through vastly different lenses by the opposing sides. For the United States, military planners argued that Linebacker II was a tactical success that achieved its primary political objective, forcing Hanoi back to the negotiating table to sign an agreement that allowed America to withdraw with honor. They pointed to the devastating damage inflicted on North Vietnamese infrastructure and the high kill-to-loss ratio of their aircraft. However, for Vietnam, the campaign was celebrated as a historic victory of epic proportions. a modern-day equivalent to the decisive Battle of Dien Bien Phu in 1954. They had faced the absolute pinnacle of Western military technology and had not only survived, but had inflicted unprecedented losses on the pride of the U.S. Air Force, shooting down 15 B-52s, according to U.S. records. And even more, according to Vietnamese claims. The true lesson of the battle lies in the realization that technology alone cannot guarantee victory when confronted by a highly motivated, adaptable, and resilient opponent. The Vietnamese defenders did not win through superior firepower, but through creative adaptation, meticulous preparation, and an unyielding commitment to their national sovereignty. They proved that even the most sophisticated weapons systems have vulnerabilities that can be exploited by human ingenuity and courage. This battle serves as a timeless reminder that in warfare, the human element resolve, flexibility, and tactical innovation remains the ultimate deciding factor. It challenged the prevailing military doctrines of the era and forced planners worldwide to reconsider the limits of strategic air power in asymmetric conflicts. This clash also highlighted the profound ethical and strategic questions surrounding the use of strategic bombing against civilian areas, a debate that continues to influence military doctrine and international law to this day. Ultimately, the story of the air war over Hanoi teaches us that the outcome of any conflict is shaped not just by the machines of war, but by the hearts and minds of those who operate them and those who endure their fury. The scars of December 1972 are still visible in Hanoi today, preserved in the quiet waters of Tiep Lake, where the rusted wreckage of a downed B-52 bomber still juts out of the water. Surrounded by modern homes and bustling cafes, it serves as a silent, powerful monument to a conflict that defined a generation and reshaped the geopolitics of the Cold War. It stands as a physical testament to the high-stakes duel that occurred in these skies 50 years ago, drawing visitors from all over the world who seek to understand the reality of the air war. As we look back at those 12 days and nights, we are reminded of the immense human cost of war and the incredible resilience of those who lived through it. What do you think is the most important takeaway from this dramatic clash of technology and human resolve? Does it change your perspective on how modern conflicts are decided? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into one of history's most intense aerial battles fascinating, please hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more balanced, historically accurate stories from Vietnam's rich past. Your support helps us continue to bring these incredible historical narratives to light, ensuring that the lessons of the past are never forgotten. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video. We hope this story encourages you to explore the deep complexities of history and appreciate the incredible human endurance that defines our shared past. By engaging with these stories, you help keep the memory of these events alive and foster a deeper understanding of the diverse perspectives that shape our world. Thank you once again for your time, and until next time, keep exploring.